Peace, everybody. Welcome back. Big thanks to all of you who are channel members and patrons for whom I wanted to make this immediately available. This was a great interview I just did with Comrade Zizwe Tchiguka of the All African People's Revolutionary Party that will be featured next Monday for the ongoing series on Black Liberation Media regarding Patrice Lumumba and Frantz Fanon. But we get into some other things about African history and what's going on now. So I thought I would make that much available right away. And then, of course, feature the segment for the show Monday. So please check this out. Thank you again very much for your support. Peace, as long as you're willing to fight for it, as Fred Hampton used to say, and free to land. Thanks again. I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like. All right, Comrade Zizwe, it's so good to have you join us again, and thank you very much for, of course, reaching out and looking to help me and us supplement this discussion. If you would, before we got started more completely, just say a word or two about who you are and what you do, and then we'll go from there.
Well, I'm a member of the All African People's Revolutionary Party and the African Party for the Independence of Guinea and Cape Verde.
Mhm.
I was a part of the ceremony at the end of our party congress in January 2023, in which we became official members of the PAIGC. And I have my own membership card, and they gave us the Cabral hat
Oh,
and a
right on.
shawl as a part
Oh,
of that
wow.
process. So I was lucky enough to um, be recruited into the All African People's Revolutionary Party in my first year of college. And I've been involved ever since, back in 1973. And so I'm so happy to be a part of this organization and a part of this movement. And I'm just happy to learn. I love learning. I'm a member of a cadre circle of the All African People's Revolutionary Party. And so that's me, basically. I was a product of the Black Power movement. All that stuff affected my life, and which led me to, in my early years, I was already very much radical. When I was 8 years old, I didn't agree with. They asked us to cry for John F. Kennedy when he was assassinated. I refused to cry. I refused to be a part of that stuff. I was rebelling because when I was in school in '63, I witnessed the fire hoses being lit on the children as they demonstrated in Birmingham, and I noticed a whole lot of things. I was conscious of my consciousness was growing, seeing the outright racism that was manifested, even at a very early age in my life, and racism all around. Then the rebellions and the protests that occurred where I live in Cleveland, Ohio. So all that affected my consciousness. So that by the time I got to high school, one of the elders in the community, a brother who was a year or two older than me, asked me to join come participate in Kwanzaa and join the Congress of African People. And that was around 16, 17 years old. But then when I went to college, Kwame Ture made a presentation at University of Akron where I was going to school. I didn't even go to the presentation, but a couple of brothers older than me came and saw me with the only dashiki I had, with my very limited haberdashery. And they said, "Oh, we're going to ask him to join the party." And they explained the program to me, and the rest is history.
Right on. So that's a little bit. That is history is a little bit about what we wanted to talk about this
Yeah.
morning, and I really appreciate you reaching out because you had asked me if how familiar was I with the secret agreement between Patrice Lumumba and Kwame Nkrumah,
Yes.
and I was, as with a lot of these areas, just woefully underinformed. So, but as we want to commemorate not only, of course, Lumumba's 100th birthday, but the ideas, obviously, with which he worked and deployed in struggle, please let's talk a little bit about this agreement and what it yeah what it was meant to signify, what it was meant to not signify but do. Yeah.
Yeah. So to put it in the proper context, if we go back to the 1945 Fifth Pan African Congress that took place in Manchester, England, in which the leaders of the Pan African movement, who had benefited from all the brothers and sisters who had been a part of the previous Pan African Congresses and Conference of 1900, including Kwame Nkrumah, George Padmore, C.L.R. James, and many others who met in Manchester, England. One of the resolutions that came out of that was to build mass-based parties. And from 1945 to 1960, many countries in Africa, after being divided up into 53 separate units, began to gain their independence. Most people don't know that Sudan was independent in 1956, before Ghana. As a matter of fact, they claim that Egypt was independent in 1922, but we know that it was just a puppet government. So when Ghana became independent, the significance of Ghana becoming independent, in which Kwame Nkrumah in that Independence Day speech said that the independence of Ghana is meaningless unless it's tied to the independence of the whole of Africa. So the very next year, he immediately began to work on that, what he had been saying in that speech, and also in different organizations he had participated in prior to becoming the prime minister in Ghana in 1951, before independence. And he was thrown in jail along with his comrades. And when the masses of the people overwhelmingly voted for Ghana for him to become the prime minister, and then they negotiated with the colonizing power, which was England, to attain independence on March 6, 1957. So as I said, the very next year, Nkrumah and his administration, which included Africans from all over the world, like George Padmore, C.L.R. James, and others, they decided to have what was called the All African Peoples Conference on April 15th, 1958, also known as the Conference of Independent African States, which they declared that as Africa Freedom Day. And then later on that year, in December, they had another All African Peoples Conference, where some say that the first one was not an All African Peoples Conference, but the one in December was definitely the All African Peoples Conference, in which Patrice Lumumba attended and participated in. And as the leader of the MNC, the Movement National Congolese, he learned a lot, and he began to understand the necessity to fight for the liberation of the Congo as a cornerstone, the building block to the United States of Africa. And this is what he clearly stated every time he talked, is that the Congo would be the centerpiece for the United States of Africa. So after that conference, when he came back to the Congo, and they managed to win the elections in 1960 to the dismay of all the imperialist forces throughout the world. And then he made his Independence Day speech, although he was not on the rostrum. And that's amazing that here he is, the elected prime minister, and they didn't even put him on the rostrum to speak when the King of Belgium came to talk about how they supposedly granted independence to the Congo and all this good stuff that King Leopold II did in the Congo. And of course, Lumumba made that speech that was so riveting that the imperialists and all their lackeys were very much angry about what he said. They really didn't want him to be able to speak, but he managed to manipulate his way into that rostrum, which is a good thing for us, because he exposed to the world the atrocities that had been occurring in the Congo for centuries. It also exposed to the world the necessity for the Congo once again to be the centerpiece of the building of the United States of Africa. And so that's how that all came into being. And then this is June 30th, 1960. In the year 1960, we had a whole lot of things that happened in regard to the struggle for pan-Africanism. It was called the Year of Africa because you had 16 different African nation states that attained independence, but yet at the same time, you had the infamous Charlottesville Massacre, March 21st, 1960, in occupied Azania, right? So while you're having these states becoming independent, at the same time, you got the opposite of that, where you had brutal repression going on in occupied Azania and other places around the continent. So we know that these granting of independence programs were basically a new strategy of imperialism. They realized that the winds of change were blowing across Africa. So it's better that we concede and give them sham independence or flag independence rather than go through a brutal armed struggle, which is very costly, right? And which would wind up being the death knell of imperialism. So this is what they did. They conceded, okay, let's grant independence, let them have the independence, but we're going to keep the economy tied to Europe and America. And so this is the backdrop to what Patrice Lumumba faced in the Congo, and the events that proceeded after the independence are a reflection of that whole situation. So now he goes to Washington, D.C. to talk to the president of the U.S. in 1960, which is Eisenhower. And, you know, I revisited the soundtrack to a coup, thanks to you for hipping me to that one. I was reviewing that last night, and I'm glad I reviewed it because a lot of details I missed where they showed how he travels to the U.S. to try to get some kind of relationship whereby they would support the independence of the Congo, and Eisenhower refused to meet with him. He went to go golfing. You know,
Yeah.
So immediately after that, that was July 25th. So he comes back, and that's when he signed the so-called secret agreement, which really wasn't secret, with the already established Ghana-Guinea-Mali Union that was started in 1958 when Kwame Nkrumah, after the independence of Ghana, provided a 10 million pound loan to Conakry, Guinea in 1958, and then provided Mali with $14 million loan to help those other nation states as a result of the imperialists pulling out and trying to destroy the economy. In the spirit of pan-Africanism, Kwame Nkrumah was doing the proper thing, helping the sister states to get up on their feet so we can develop a United States of Africa. So that was the launch of the Ghana-Guinea-Mali Union. And here Lumumba knows about this and decides that I want to join this Union of African States also, bring the Congo into it. And the declaration was signed on August 8, 1960, to be a part of the Ghana-Guinea-Mali Union as the basis of the Union of African States. And the Congo was supposed to be a center, the headquarters actually. It was going to be moved to the Congo for the United States of Africa or the Union of African States when he signed that agreement. Also, they were supposed to be, as part of one of the documents that spells out these resolutions they agreed to, it was supposed to be the center of a media, a radio station, TV station, a media complex. So those were the things that were, it's a lot of more details about this agreement that that we'll have to talk about sometime in the future, or when you display the presentation by brother and comrade Shakara.
Shaka Ra, yeah, no doubt. And I don't know
Yeah.
if that will have, if I will have played that before by now and then or not, but we will cover it. And part of the brilliant presentation is that it includes the 8 major points of
Yes.
that agreement,
Yes.
which I agree that that Shakara sort of joyfully highlights, which is number
Yes.
6, which is military cooperation.
Yes.
That
Thank you.
they were very clear that not only that African unity was necessary, colonial boundaries needed to be destroyed,
Exactly.
but that they were going to have to not only share and redistribute resources, but defend them. Uh,
Exactly.
and as we see even right now today, that concept is by no means out of date. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, because they
Yeah,
can. Nkrumah had called for the necessity to have a African high command, and when Lumumba signed on to it, that's one of the 8 points. They also talked about the economic integration of Africa, I believe, if I'm correct, one of the 8 points.
absolutely,
And
absolutely.
because Nkrumah was talking about an African common market,
In
you
fact,
know.
let's just pull it up here.
Thank you.
Uh, and I will, like I said, it'll be. This is from Shaka Ra's presentation, and I will make sure that it'll be linked and shared. And we may have already played it by now. I don't know, but these are the points that he highlights in his presentation that include number 5 there. Or well, repositioning Africa in terms of its relationship to the European Common Market,
Mhm.
engaging number 4 in trade agreements with African states. So 1 is unqualified support of all of the African states in the general struggle for Pan-African bloc, a
Mhm.
policy of neutralism with the purpose of achieving genuine independence, the breaking down of colonial barriers through cultural exchanges, trade agreements between African states, Africa's position with regard to the European Common Market, military cooperation, the building in Leopoldville of a powerful radio station with the aid of all African states, and the creation of a research center in
Yes.
Leopoldville as well. So, and then I'm sure they would have moved quickly to rename
Mhm.
that city as well.
Yes.
But but yeah, so this is part of what, as you were pointing out, would have struck a lot of fear among Western powers then and now.
Yes.
So
You know
it's
what, Jared? Look at what's going on now in the Congo. I know you probably know about the recent
not
agreement.
enough. Oh yeah, no, please, yeah, talk about that, please. Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, the current president of Congo just sold out the Congo, made an agreement with this U.S. administration to allow for the U.S. to exploit those rare minerals and other resources in the Congo in exchange for protecting the Congo from the incursion of the so-called M23 and the other forces that were invading in the eastern provinces. So this is all a part of that imperialist intrigue to control the resources of the Congo to the benefit of the imperialist powers. It's a disgusting move on behalf of the current president, and it shows the necessity for us to put together a coordinated military and all African People's Revolutionary Army in the within the framework of a all African Committee for Political Coordination, because we got a lot of work to do to continue this struggle to unify Africa.
Yeah, and I was just looking at part of what the current Congolese administration is arguing is that I'm sure the U.S. loves is also that this deal with the U.S. will help them reduce their dependence on China.
Yes.
Uh, so but yeah, to your point, it's just such a diabolically backwards
Yeah.
and reactionary move, certainly from where we were just talking in terms of Lumumba, and that's
Yes. And you know what else I want to comment on, Jed, in that
sure,
regard?
please.
Now, looking at the soundtrack to a coup, it shows how they were saying that Russia and China is influencing the people in the Congo. It's that same lie, the same form of psychological warfare, which you always talk about, that they was using back then. It's the same tactic. Russia and China is influencing Africa, like what's going on with the Alliance for Sahelian States and other efforts to get Africa liberated, totally liberated, unified. So they always pull out the Russia-China card, like as if Africans can't think for themselves, you know. And we don't understand that, we have been brutalized and oppressed and colonized, and that we have the right to choose who our international partners are going to be. So it's the same thing going on to this day that they was doing when Congo became independent.
Yeah, it is all. I mean, it's at its most simple level, which is unfortunately in many cases just with these issues where I'm stuck. I mean, it is just a basic understanding that the resources that Congo and the rest of the continent have are going to attract the attention of the rest of the world one way or another. So this idea that any engagement with Russia or China or anyone else means that they are subservient to those countries is on the surface absurd. But the
Yes.
flip side of it is also that to Lumumba's point, and just to sort of bring it back to what he and Nkrumah and others were trying to do, that relationship still should be governed by and benefiting first and foremost the Africans and a reorganization outside of colonial imposition of the continent itself. So in other words,
Exactly.
It's not realistic to expect that again people around the world are not going to come looking for some sort of arrangement to get access to those resources. It's just a matter of what will that relationship look like and who will ultimately be in control of it and benefit. So of course the US is happy to use these false claims to say, oh, when we see them dealing with Russia or China or anyone else, that means they are falling under the thumb of some form of communism or something else, and therefore we, the U.S. and the West, have to get involved, so that of course the U.S. or the West could do something very similar, if not more exploitative and hostile, in extracting those resources and controlling the land and the labor for their benefit. So it's all just, I mean, it's
Yes,
so.
it's a struggle.
Yeah,
It's
go
part
ahead,
of the
please.
struggle. It's a part of the struggle for the total liberation and unification of Africa under scientific socialism. So imperialism is still, it never sleeps. It's still trying its best to keep Africa dependent on the Western imperialist system as we try to put together the unity among these states and to integrate these economies. So it's been a long-term battle, and it's still going to be much more time before we can break away. And as a matter of fact, this thing called AFRICOM, the Africa Command, has been on display recently, as you full well know, with the situation in Burkina Faso and the Alliance for Sahelian States, whereby the head of AFRICOM, this African, Mark Langley, just had a meeting in Kenya, right? And rallied 29, 30 African states to be a part of this AFRICOM program to so-called defend these states against terrorism, which we know is just a smokescreen for continued military incursion and the support of terrorism, actually, in Africa. So they're gearing up They're gearing up for an all-out battle over Africa. They already have 29 military bases. And as we studied in the party, we know that they have these 29 military bases, and no country except for one has any kind of relationship with the U.S. military, and that would be Eritrea. Only one. So now, with the independence of the Alliance for Sahelian States kicking out the U.S. military and the French and the other European imperialist forces, this battle is waging. It's getting more intense now for the control of Africa. And what's going on in Iran is very important. We're writing a statement as we speak to get it finished and how it relates to Africa, because this is all part of this policy of full spectrum dominance. And so this conflict going on in Iran ain't nothing, because when it comes down to this fight over Africa, which is the one that gave the life to European imperialism from the beginning, and it's also going to spell the death of European imperialism. The fight over Africa's resources, that is. So that intense battle is yet to come. We're gearing up for it. The mass of African people are the youth, the women, are showing their disdain for the imperialist forces. This is sweeping Africa, and what we have to do is get our people organized for the oncoming struggle that's going to be happening over Africa in the near future. It's happening as we speak, through psychological warfare, the use of these proxy forces that they have in Africa.
Mm.
They're still attacking Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. That's causing conflict between Eritrea and Ethiopia. The conflict in Sudan, breaking up Sudan into South Sudan and Sudan. All these things are a manifestation of imperialism. And so that's why we have to get Africa and African people unified into a coordinated force along with our international allies. Because we're fighting against a global system that is very powerful and has many puppet Africans fighting alongside with them as a result of neocolonialism. And also puppet states around the world, the Arab states who refuse to support the Palestinian struggle, who stand against Iran. All these forces are lined up, getting ready to help to keep Africa in subjugation. So we have to get organized. We got to get Africa organized. We got to get our people organized who are Africans, who are outside of Africa, and all the working class people around the world. Because as we see recently, the struggle is getting very intense on a global scale.
Well, Comrade Zizwe, I appreciate that, and I definitely appreciate you reaching out and adding some important supplement to this attempt at a series here, and look forward to hearing back from you, and definitely I'll be looking for that the AAPRP statement on Iran, and we'll share that, of course. So this has been great. Thank you very much. And
thank you. It was my pleasure.
Right on. Ready for the
Anytime.
revolution.
Just call me. Here's my number and a dime. Call me anytime.